Waiting for sunshine. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Live One for One, where we have conversations that challenge us to live a life that will change a life. My name is John, and today I have a friend and a mentor named Bryan Watson, Major General Bryan Watson.
Yep.
Yeah.
Retired.
Yeah. Bryan, I'm glad you're here, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You have been, for me personally, just a divine appointment, I think. You know, it was funny because I was very busy at our organization, and a lady by the name of Bonnie Ryan, who was on our board at the organization I'm a part of called the Bridge House, she said, "Hey, I think you should be part of something called Leadership Wilson," which is ran by Dory Mitchell and her wonderful team. I didn't really know what Leadership Wilson was, and basically it's from what I asked individuals, what is Leadership Wilson? They said, "Oh, it's the Illuminati of Lebanon." I was laughing so hard. Yeah. So I didn't say that. I won't say who said it, but basically, you know, just people that are trying to do a lot of good in their organizations and are leaders coming together for a period of time, many months, to get to know each other, to learn, grow, and learn about our community, learn about what's happening in Wilson County and so many facets, right? And so the very first requirement that they have is that we go on a retreat.
Yeah, nobody wanted to
which
do
is
that.
super awkward. I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, we're going on a retreat with a bunch of people we don't know, doing icebreakers and team building.
And you can't bring your car.
You can't bring your car. Yeah, you have to sit with someone that you're supposed to talk to the entire time that you don't know. And then you're going to room with someone that night. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just way outside my comfort zone as an individual, you know? And I get paired up with you, and I'm thinking, like, you know, I don't know this guy. And so I'm trying to be just friendly. And you were just right out of the gate, super warm and welcoming and just such a cool guy. And you and I mean, really from that point on, there was a relationship that I really believe the Lord lined up, not specifically just for me personally as a leader, but also for what our organization needed as well too. And so I'm very blessed to have you not only on this podcast, man, but in my life.
Well, I appreciate that.
Part of what we're doing, and we'll unpack that a little bit. But first of all, what was your experience with Leadership Wilson? Give me your take on it. How'd you feel about it?
So, you know, first of all, I didn't think I got to Leadership Wilson because my wife went through.
Oh, your wife did? Okay.
Yeah, and so
Gotcha.
she said, you got to do this.
Yeah.
And my motivation was, you know, in the Army, 35 years, I moved 23 times.
Gosh.
And I found in retirement that the hardest thing to do is to grow roots into a community.
Yeah.
All of my other moves, you just inherited a network. It's
Sure.
a military community.
Right.
You 30 days and you've got it.
You're in. Yeah, that makes sense.
But coming here was different.
Yeah.
And everything from finding a church to, you know, getting friends and all that. And so for me, Leadership Wilson was less about teaching leadership and more about exposing in the community where you need to lead and growing a network, people like you. You know, we now have a class of people that we can call, that we rely on. You then have a class of classes because there's been so many of them. So that was my motivation, and that's really what I got out of it. And our relationship is the diamond of that entire experience.
Oh, man. There it is. There you go.
No, it is.
I love it. That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. Likewise, I feel the same. And, you know, I think it also shows me, again, super outside of my comfort zone. And I have to give it up for Dory Mitchell, because the requirement that Leadership Wilson has for you to, one, attend the retreat, two, to then be a part of every single event once a month. You have all these cards that you have to complete for all these different.
I mean, how many of us would have ever gone?
Oh, never.
Sit through a court or go into local government and go to a commission meeting. And it opens your eyes.
It does. Yeah, it does. It immerses you and really, I think in a lot of ways really helps you have more perspective and appreciation for what people are doing, what your first responders are doing. Because we did police ride-alongs,
right?
We did, you're attending your city council meetings. You have much more appreciation for your council members, your mayor. You have
School board of
education, all of it. Like you just, even when we went and we did, and we were at Department of Transportation, and you see all the traffic, and
city planning,
you're frustrated, and you're like, oh, no one's doing anything, and then you go and
light,
right, and then you go and you sit there, and then you hear the reasons behind, and you realize, oh, these people aren't even responsible for this. Like, it's actually this group over here, and so it really does eye open. So so my organization isn't Leadership Wilson, but we were part of it, and this is a huge plug for Dory. So Dory, I hope you share this. Dory's the and if you're listening, you don't know what Leadership Wilson is, and you're not even from this area, I would encourage you to check it out, because maybe God might put something in your heart to do in your city.
Absolutely.
Because it is. Can you imagine if every county in the nation had something like Leadership Wilson? I mean, that would be game changing.
Yeah, but not everybody has a Dory Mitchell.
That's right. That's true.
Thank goodness.
We will set up a meeting with Dory if you need it. Yeah. No, man. So, the beauty of that is one of the things that, so we talked about, our relationship building through Leadership Wilson. And we were, as an organization, at a time where my board chair, Brandy Courtwright, and I were saying, we really need to do an offsite, and we really need to get our board together and chat. And so when we did that, we were like, well, who could potentially facilitate this? I didn't personally want to do it. I feel like I get too emotionally involved, and I really felt like we needed to have somebody outside of our organization do it. She agreed with that. And so we kind of reached out, and then in that time, we're getting to know you. And then next thing you know, I reached out to you, said, hey, brother, would you be willing to do something like that? Me not even realizing that, like, you have an organization that you're already part of called Lead to Serve, which is a leadership consulting.
Yeah, that's my LLC. Right. So Lead to Serve comes right out of the Bible, and we're called to lead, not because we want to lead, but we want to lead to serve. The greatest among you will be the one that's enslaved best.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Tell me, just before we kind of go into what our relationship and how that developed with the Bridge House and some of the things that you took us through, your passion for leadership.
Yeah.
Retired general. Your dad was a general.
Yeah, that's right.
Was his dad a general?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, that'd have been wild, man.
His dad was a farmer.
Okay. Awesome. Tell me your passion for leadership. Why are you so passionate about it? And what do you see that drives you to just continue to do what you do, to lead?
Yeah. So, well, I think, first of all, leadership doesn't just matter. It's everything. And I'm not talking about somebody who carries a title. I think we are all leaders. So there's entry argument number one. We all have to be able to see the leader that's in every person. And when I work with, big global companies, whether they're in manufacturing, finance, pharmaceutical, construction, one of the messages I have, I think one of the things that the Army and all the militaries, but, my experience in the Army, that sets you apart is that you not only grow your own, you have to grow your own.
Yeah.
We don't outsource. We don't all of a sudden say, well, we're going to bring in a general who's never served a day down on, at the tactical edge. And so that makes us see every, and I'll use this term, although we don't have it in the Army, every hourly wage employee, people that are down on the manufacturing room floor in the Army, soldiers that have just come in and they're at the squad, you have to see them like they could be the next command sergeant major.
I love that.
And when you do that, you invest it. You give them your time. You listen. You begin to influence them and teach them how to influence others. And so my passion is that I think we've lost that. The ability to look at each individual and say, yep, I see a leader. It's worth my time to invest them and to make them even better. And I think the business world in particular could really benefit from that. And then the other thing is, all the data says most people either change or leave a job because
Right.
of poor leadership.
Yeah.
It has rarely anything to do with a compensation scale or
Right.
what drives people away and what keeps them in the team they're on is good leadership. So to me, that's fundamental.
Yeah, that's so good. With you having so many conversations with so many different organizations, I mean, from the nonprofit sector to, obviously large businesses, I imagine churches.
Mhm.
What is a common thread that you see that is a hurdle maybe for that leader, maybe the top leader to get over? What's the biggest issue that you kind of see that they're dealing with in those organizations?
I think a little bit of it's a statement on where we're at as a society. We have lost the art of personal connection.
Mm,
You would think that in the information age, when we're more connected than we
yeah,
ever have been before,
man, that's so true.
but we've lost the art of personal connection.
Yeah.
And most senior leaders, as they grow in the military, they grow in rank. Certainly in corporate America, as you grow um, in seniority in an organization, we lose personal connection.
Mm,
Our calendars are just inundated. It's meeting to meeting to meeting. You're doing crisis management. Stock market's going up and down. You got supply chain problems. And instead of the term of empowering others, which is really just giving others ownership,
yes.
um, you can only do that if you have trust in them.
Yeah.
And the only way you get trust is if you personally connect.
Right.
And they have to personally connect with you in order to trust. And you have to personally connect with them.
Right.
And if we've lost that art, if we don't take the time to get to know one another, that I think is the biggest hurdle that most senior leaders have is they don't trust
Mm,
because they haven't personally connected.
yeah. I could see that. It is interesting as technology develops, and we're seeing AI move into so many spaces right now too. Productivity, if leveraged correctly, can go way up, but the consumer and customer experience can go way down, pending because again, if we're talking to robots, if we're talking to, you know, uh, we're talking to a voicemail or whatever, or even when it comes to senior leadership, and we're just trying to make a phone call, but all we're getting is a text back.
Yeah.
That's just simply okay, no problem. You can start to technology can start to create a wall to where you no longer have the access that you had before. Whereas before you were face to face, you're having conversations, you're picking up the phone, um, and I think you're right that as we grow as leaders, we have to continually remember um, how would we do it with our family?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to create like my son can't talk to me because I'm the dad, so he's got to go through his mom first, then he's
Yeah.
come to me. I mean, if you think about it in that context too, it's like silly, like if my son calls me, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to be like, hey man, what's up, dude? I want to talk to him. I want to engage with him.
Right.
And I think there can be some similarities to that we should take into our businesses and our organizations too, of like engaging with people like that. You're so right, dude.
Yeah. So let's just, we'll unpack a little bit.
Yeah, do it.
So if you think about trust
Yeah.
and what is trust,
Mm-hmm.
um, it really is our willingness to place ourselves vulnerable to the actions of another person.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, I trust you to do this thing,
Yeah.
what you're saying is, I'm going to put myself vulnerable to whatever you do,
Yeah.
your actions. I'm going to place myself vulnerable, even when I'm the boss or whether I'm a subordinate, doesn't
Mhm.
matter. And the Army has a beautiful model for thinking about trust. And I think the simplicity of it may resonate with people. It has three components.
Okay.
First, You won't trust somebody to do something unless they have demonstrated or you believe they have a certain competency level.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in the business world, we hire and fire based on competence.
Right.
Almost solely.
Sure.
It's probably 80% of the equation. But you could have the most competent doctor. Let's say you walk in, you need to have some sort of medical care. You look at all the credentials on the wall,
mm-hmm.
and you know that they are the bomb
Mm-hmm.
in this particular area where you need. They are the expert. But that's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that has to come to fruition is you have to have a sense that they are committed.
Mm-hmm.
They could be the most competent person in the world, but unless they're committed to you, you don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that commitment has to be felt.
Yeah.
This is where personal connection begins to be really important, because we can judge commitment. We can buy commitment. Compensation scales often do that. Retirement plans often do that. But you've got to sense that whoever's leading, whoever you're trusting, is committed to you, and then also that they're committed to whatever the mission is, your healthcare.
Sure.
Okay. But that's not enough. Because the last part, and this is where personal connection is so important. You can be extremely competent. You can be extremely committed. But if I sense that you don't have impeccable character, that your values that you hold dear actually drive your behaviors, that you are consistent with those values even when no one is looking.
Yeah.
You have to have that component. That doctor may be the resident expert. You get the sense that they're committed. But when you're asleep on the operating table and they start to cut corners, if you had that sense, then you're not going to trust them.
Yeah.
This is where we can judge competence without personal connection. We can judge some commitment without personal connection. But I need to get to know you as a person in order to judge your character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what leaders have forgotten. People need to judge their character. They need to see it. That means you have to let them inside instead of doing the Heisman Trophy and keeping everybody at arm's length.
Yeah.
And in the same way, you have to dive into the lives of those that you lead.
Yeah, that's good.
That makes it.
Yeah, that's really good. I remember when you and I first had lunch together, we talked a little bit about this, and even just as you're unpacking it again, I'm just taking things away from it. When you're having conversations with senior leadership, with your organization, really in a lot of ways, you're almost kind of addressing maybe potential character issues that they have.
Sure.
Not that you're saying that you see per se, but more you're asking them to look internally as an individual.
Yeah. And we, all of us have them.
Yeah.
I have mine.
Yeah.
The question is, do you know them?
Right.
And the question is, are you aware of them? What are your shortfalls? Where is your character got some chinks in it?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are you doing something?
Yeah.
And I think in the Bible, we are called to personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't love one another.
Yeah.
Truly, unconditionally, unless you get to know another person. It's just, it's how we are wired. And so anyway, I think that's the lost art.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. When you're having these conversations with these top tier individuals, these are successful men and women that have accomplished a lot in their life. You're sitting with them and you're walking them through this. Do you usually see a desire to respond to what you've laid out for them, where they're like, yeah, man, I'm all in on this. I want to do this. Because that's hard. Like
it is
when you start asking your team about, like, I listen to Patrick Lencioni a lot, and they have these exercises where
books.
Yeah. And he does this one thing, which I'm like, I think to myself of my past leaders, and I can think of some that maybe would do this, and I can pretty sure I know a few that definitely would not be that vulnerable. Where he says, I want you to write on this card one thing that I do really well, and one thing that I do really poorly. And he has everybody kind of in the circle do these type of things, and I'm going to celebrate you for being honest. And so there's this element of like, hey, we're going to celebrate the honesty of what we do well and what we don't with each other. And I'm hearing that, and when I've gone through a lot of these different leadership um, conversations or maybe even classes, I think they, in essence, they sound great. It's all great content, but is it going to be applied? Because, like you said, when you have your blind spots and then someone tells you you're a terrible listener and you come across incredibly arrogant, you don't think that about yourself, obviously, right? That's why we have our spouses, right? They tell us.
That's right. That's right.
And our kids, right? Our kids and our spouses do a great job at helping us see our true self. But when that's confronted to us, I mean, you either are going to change and look inwardly, or you're going to stay the same, and then maybe even begrudge that person for saying that, and maybe not even want them on your team because you just want to do it. Do you see more people when you're in these conversations lean in and say, man, I want to change, I want to be the leader that I need to be? Or do you walk away sometimes feeling like, man, I just looking for someone who just wants to grasp it and be humble and move forward?
Yeah, I think 90%, 95% all walk away. They're all fired up. There's always a 5, maybe 10% that go, okay, I'm in the financial sector. This guy's in the military. We are not alike.
Mm.
So whatever the tools that he's talking about or the concepts he's talking about, they don't apply to me. He doesn't understand my world. So you'll always have that 10%.
Sure.
By the way, the argument against that is it doesn't matter what sector you're in.
Mm-hmm.
The common denominator is you lead people.
Yes.
And so that's why everything that I've gone through in leading people immediately applies to the things that I don't care what business sector you're in. But I think one of the things that we do different, and I'm maybe beating the drum on personal connection a little bit.
No, I love it, man.
Is when you come through the programs, we make you have an action plan. So you've had to take that hard look in the mirror
mm-hmm.
and admit that, yep, I could use a little work here. And, oh, by the way, I'm really doing well here, because we tend to want to focus on the things I got to improve and forget that we're doing a lot of things right. And so we've got to also take action to sustain those things that are going well for us.
Yeah.
We got to give ourselves some credit.
Right.
But when you walk away from our programs at Thayer Leadership, you also have what's called a battle buddy. And we try and build a relationship between 2 or 3 people.
Okay.
And you have to disclose, here is my plan of attack. Here's my action plan. Here's what I want to do differently. Here's what I want to sustain about myself, so that they can hold you accountable.
Mm.
And what's been amazingly successful is some of these, they stay in touch. Some of them are in the same company. Sometimes they're not.
Right.
They're in hugely different parts of the company.
Okay.
For these global companies. But they're staying in touch. They're getting together, once or twice a week. Hey, are you still working on that? Are you doing this? Because you committed to me, and now we have a relationship. And so I'm gonna call you out if we're not working on this. Or if they're in the same company, hey, I just heard you reacted this way. That's not what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll hold them accountable. And then we have, we also do these check-ins. So after you've done the program, 30 to 60 days afterwards, we meet and we talk about where we're at. I think that's another hugely important. But your discussion is with these battle buddies where you're laying it out. Okay, I'm still struggling here. I haven't been able to do this. I haven't put this in place. I said I was going to do this, and then my calendar took over.
Yeah.
And I think time is for these senior executives, they don't know how to fight for their own white space on their calendars. They let it fill up with all kinds of things.
Sure.
And they don't fight for their white space.
Yeah, that's good. What do you say to, so top tier leadership, whether it's a pastor, executive, fill in the blank, that personal connection when, say they have their, maybe this is an area that someone's listening to and they say, I could do a better job on this, but at the same time, I'm fighting for my calendar here. And I have a employee, whether they have, mid-size organization to even a small size, and they're trying to expand and they have so much they're trying to accomplish. How can we set up that type of culture? Because obviously we can't meet with everybody. We can't sit and have, an hour of coffee. Like I was just listening to Craig Groeschel and the Global Leadership Summit, and he was talking about how he won't even go to lunch with an individual. If they want to have lunch with him, he'll have lunch with him in his office, or he doesn't take coffee appointments, or he never has a meeting in his office. He always goes to somebody else's office so he can leave. Now he says, don't adopt my practices, find out what works for you. And I respect that about him, that he has his own way of that he does things and believes in his own philosophy of leadership. And I think there's a lot of great things in it, but I think at the same time, like if we want to have personal connection, we really want to work on that. How do we do that while also not spreading ourselves too thin? Is that bringing in, just developing a culture so that their superiors and the people that are in these places, that they're having that for the people? Like, walk me through that a little bit.
Well, I think we'll borrow a principle out of Dave Ramsey.
Do it.
All right. So whatever your priority is, then you have to allocate resources to achieving that priority, and you got to do it up front. The biblical principle of tithing is you do that up front.
Right.
Not what you have left over.
Sure.
You take it off the top. If building a personal connection is important, then when you're laying out your calendar, it's the first thing that goes on. Now, here's where business leaders, I think, make a mistake.
Okay.
And I certainly did. We think that time that we're allocating now has to have a structure to it. Just put a block of time in. And then as you go through the week, decide how you're going to use that.
Okay.
But you're going to devote it to building a personal connection. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's walking around the company.
Yeah.
Maybe it's somebody that you've seen a couple things in their performance and you want to go talk to them. But you're not going to talk about the performance. You're going to see, is there something underlying that drop in performance? But you carve out that time and you do it up front. We call it leadership by walking around, where I'm going to go meet soldiers where they are, and I'm going to connect with them, and I'm going to also let them inside. Because they need to hear my struggles.
Sure.
They need to hear what's on my mind.
Is that a normal practice for generals to
we call it battlefield circulation, or leading by walking around.
I don't know why I have this view in my mind, and
we're in our offices, and
that just like very, because I mean when I first met you and I knew you saw your credentials and who you were, you just have a certain picture of how this individual is going to be. Maybe it's because I watched too many movies. I don't know. And I think of,
you can't handle the truth.
Right. Exactly. And I think of my friend, one of my closest friends is he's 42. He's in incredible shape. He is an instructor of all the new recruits for the police academy comes in. And when I first met him, he can be an intimidating guy. I mean, he's 6'2", just bulked out. And he's a police officer, he's screaming at these recruits that come in, and he is probably one of the most gentle, loving individuals I've ever seen. The way he loves his boys, the way he loves his kids, the way he holds his boys. And it's funny, I've had conversations with him where I've called him on the phone and I hear him in the background, "You mother effer, blah, 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 blah. You get up now." And he's screaming. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I'm like, hey, buddy. He's like, oh, hey, bud, what's going on, man? He's like, how's your day? And next thing you know, he's screaming at this guy again, and I hear his other guys in the background. But I think, is it when you talk about how you let them and, as in your role, is that surprising to these individuals when you're a little bit more, are they assuming that, man, this is like here's his credentials, here's this guy who's done these things, he's had an incredible career and dedicated his life to our country, and now here you are showing them vulnerability. Is that surprising to them?
Yeah, I think sometimes it is, but let's go back to your friend, and not to be disparaging, but when I hear a story like that, I think that guy is on a road to disaster.
Oh gosh.
No, and I'll explain why. And this goes back to the personal connection, but because I lived this life,
Yeah.
where I was one way at work, I talked in a certain way, I dealt with people in a certain way, but when I went home, I had to mentally go through a transformation, because if I had talked to my wife or my kids or dealt with people in my community the same way I did at work, it would not have gone well.
Right.
And so what happens is we end up really playing the game of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Okay.
We think that these leadership attributes that work at work in how we deal with people, and yet we have we're a completely different person at home and with our friends. And what will happen is at some point in our transition between the work domain and the home domain, we're going to forget to transition. And suddenly, and I know because I lived it.
Yeah.
And I did it. Where I was one place, I was incredibly profane, in your face all the time, particularly as a young leader. And I would come home and I was the gentle giant, happy-go-lucky. And suddenly I began to bring my work persona home, and it didn't go well. And I got called out on it.
Wow.
And I tried from that point on to be the same person. And that's what I tell executives. Try and be the same person, same values, same behaviors.
Yeah.
And when you can bring those two domains together and not have to go to the transition, we are then wired in the home domain for personal connection, and that suddenly becomes the basis of our work domain.
That's good, man.
And then we allow people in just like we allow our kids in.
Sure.
It's the same.
Yeah, that's really good. I can see where that would be, you mentioned that was a tension for you. And I could see where that would be attention for him too. And I think maybe in, like you said, in all of us, maybe it's not so much outwardly where we're in a space where we're training new recruits or whatever, but I could even be as an executive director here where with a nonprofit organization and, consistently meeting people where you have to be friendly and exciting and fun. And I remember when my mom was passing, and all I could think of was anger.
Yeah.
I had so much rage in me, and I really struggled to be the same person both here and both at home.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was two totally different people.
Yeah.
I felt like when I was at work, I was just this guy who's passionate about kids who are aging out of foster care and kids that are in custody. And I was. I was exciting and fun. Then all of a sudden I get in my car, shut the door, and then tears would start to fall.
Right.
And I'm broken and I'm hurt and I go home and I'm quiet and I'm just kind of introverted. And, my wife's like, are you okay? And, yeah, I'm fine. And not that bubbly person, so I guess for me and somebody was kind of flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And that took me a bit to get through that, to really just be able to Lord, it really was by the Lord. Lord, I need you to help me be the same wherever I'm at.
Yeah. And our culture is that we make our domains
Yeah.
completely separate.
Yeah.
You've been taught,
Sure.
don't bring work home.
Right.
You've been taught at work, your home life is your home life.
Right. Don't bring it to work.
Don't bring it to work.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you don't,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to end up being two different people.
Yeah.
And
so as leaders, we have to give freedom to our team to be able to bring home to work and work to home.
Right.
In a functional way.
Yeah. And if you ever think about what are the elements of a good handshake?
Yeah. Strong.
Okay. So strong, but not overbearing.
Not overbearing.
Okay. First of all, the best handshakes are ones that you initiate.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't like getting caught off guard.
Sure.
All of a sudden somebody's reaching out. So then there's that intentional person to person contact.
Yes.
Handshakes are flesh on flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the look. You don't handshake somebody and look away.
Right.
You handshake and you look in the eyes. Because only when you make that sort of contact can you really peer, I think, into somebody's soul.
Sure.
And see what's going on with it.
Mm.
When we make eye contact, I know whether you're engaged, whether you're not engaged, whether you got something else on your mind.
Sure.
I can see whether you're angry. There's all kinds of communication.
Right.
And then here's the final part. The best handshakes are when you've got that eye contact and you pull somebody in just a little bit into your close space.
Yeah.
It may end up in a chest bump. It may end up into a hug. Depends on the relationship. But the best inviting handshakes are the ones where you bring them into your personal space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same way anytime we're out with our workforce, with people that we lead in our community, making eye contact, good, firm, flesh on flesh, and then bring them into your personal space.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Yeah, that's good, man. And I think it just kind of circles back to that personal connection.
Yes.
You know, and everything that we're talking about, whether it's creating a culture where you allow people to bring home to work and work to home, engaging with people and carving out time in your space as a leader to say, how am I going to engage with my team, with the people that I love? You mentioned about even just potentially just sending a text message. And when we were at that Global Leadership Summit, they mentioned that every time you think of someone in a positive way, to carve out just a few seconds to send that text out that says, hey, I want to let you know I appreciate you. And I've actually heard that a few times prior to that, and I've adopted that already. That's something I really try to do and be intentional about. And it always has blown my mind when you do that, how even when I do it with my own son, because we can even forget to do it with our own kids.
Right.
And so I do it with my son and my daughter regularly. Hey, did I tell you today how proud I am of you and how you inspire me? And start to just speak into them. And in their response, you think like, oh, you would think they would say, oh, I know that, Dad. But every time my son goes, really?
Yeah. Right.
Just that question. Really, Dad?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course. I just told you that. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, yeah, how do you not know that? I tell you that all the time. But it just shows you how much he needs that. How much, when I tell my wife, every single day, I think since we've been married, I tell her that she looks beautiful. Mm-hmm. And every day she's still like, really, babe? You really think that? You know? So as people, there is a real part of us that needs to be affirmed. And that's okay. I think a lot of times we see that as weakness. Like, why do you have to be affirmed all the time? You know, get a self-esteem. But there's actually beauty in being able to affirm each other and tell each other how much we appreciate each other. I think it's sad when we feel like that's considered weakness, that we need that or that we have to give that.
Yeah. Sense of belonging and affirmation. I mean, those are two. We are wired to be in community.
Yes.
and we are wired. We have an intense desire to have a sense of belonging. I think for our youth now, they get that through social media, which is uh, they're worried about getting likes and that kinds of things.
Sure.
But um, fueling somebody's sense of belonging is powerful. And I think you do that when all of a sudden you have a meeting and you reach out to them and it's either a compliment or I really enjoyed that conversation or whatever it is. Telling your kids, hey, you did great. They get a sense of belonging of family.
Yeah.
And I think that's just incredibly important.
Yeah. No, I agree. I love that. So you, just to kind of pivot to it, I want to highlight what you just got done doing because I think it was really, really unique.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me a little about what you just got back doing and who you got to train and kind of what you're looking to do in the future with that.
And so there are a group of retired military chaplains.
Yeah.
And it's called the International Association of Evangelical Chaplains, and it's a Christian-based chaplaincy. But their mission, their ministry, is to help developing countries develop a chaplain corps, whether it's in their paramilitary, whether it's in their police force, whether it's their national police, their militaries, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, or Marines. We take for granted in this country, and I took for granted, I thought everybody had a chaplain corps. But in all of our militaries, we have chaplains of all faith bases whose mission is to spiritually feed those that we lead. And so I've been surprised in countries that you would think have a chaplain corps, but they don't.
Okay. And
so this ministry helps. We work with their defense departments and get the idea of if you can't afford an entire chaplain program, can we help you build a set of volunteer chaplains? But you have to recognize that they are now spiritual leaders. The commanders have to help them have a ministry inside their units.
So they're empowering them.
And so we just did that down in Trinidad and Tobago. And we had leaders from several nations all come together. And this IAEC, the International Association of Evangelical Chaplains, does this it does it in the Caribbean, it does it in South America, it does it in Africa, does it in Eastern Europe. And it's just, I am not a chaplain. I come in with the knuckle dragging perspective of a commander.
How to get the commander on board.
What is the relationship with a chaplain? Because, here's the message. Chaplain, you may or may not have a commander who has a faith base.
Right. They may not even see the need for it.
Sure. So how do you do that? How do you get over that obstacle? And so we talk about everything from how do you care for people that are in crisis? How do you care for people who've had emotional injury? How do you have a ministry of presence? How do you get Bible studies started?
Yeah.
And so in this particular time down in Trinidad and Tobago, largely Christian leaders, but we had Muslim, we had Hindu, because we want to be true to our model, which is you need to reflect the faith base of the unit that you're serving. And so anyway, it was fascinating. I enjoyed it.
I bet. That is wild. You mentioned before we started the podcast that there's something really special happening in Africa with just the church and with the people who are on fire for Jesus. And I am always so inspired when I hear and so intrigued when I hear what's happening in other parts of the world. So easy, and we all can agree on this. You get tunnel vision. You think we end up thinking that, the Bible is written to Americans when it's not at all, obviously.
Didn't even start off in English.
Right, exactly. And I just love to hear a little bit about.
There are so many parts of the world that there is a Christian revolution or rapid evolution going on. And I think across Africa is one of those. And we don't, by the way, we, particularly here in the United States, we talk about Africa as though it's this one single entity.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's a huge continent
right.
with many, many cultures and subcultures.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, without a doubt.
But Christianity is really beginning to unify cross borders. There are just incredible churches now and people have. There is a revival going on in Africa that people need to pay attention.
Wow.
And it's just amazing. I saw when I was the director of military operations for Africa right before I retired, you would go places and visit places and you got that sense. And this organization, IAC, they're very heavy into Africa right now and raising up just some amazing leaders that are building churches with literally no resources.
Wow.
Other than people are on fire.
Yeah. What does that do to you when you see that and you're in that area and then you come back and you're here?
It make me kind of wish that we were more like them. Yeah, I do worry about the spiritual welfare of our country.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have, people have asked me, okay, well, are you only Christian based? That is my faith.
Sure.
But I'll take a soldier who has a faith base, regardless of what that faith base is, over a soldier who has no faith whatsoever.
Mm.
I'll take a soldier who is of the Islamic faith or Jewish faith, a Hindu. It doesn't matter, because then they have a set of values and they know what they are.
Mm.
And they become reliable in battle.
Mm.
And I think that anything we can do, and this is what I love about the model here in the United States, was what we're going to have chaplains of all faiths.
Yeah, right.
And if you're a Christian chaplain and you've got a soldier who's Muslim, then you're going to do everything you can to make sure that he or she is connected with a leader of that particular faith base so that they are spiritually fit.
Mm-hmm.
To include, when we're out in the field, bringing in those resources so that they can have a worship service in their faith where they're at.
Mm.
And I just love that model.
Yeah. Now, how do you, just out of curiosity, how do you leverage that with evangelism, like in your space, like as a follower of Jesus, obviously, when it comes to, and I've done, I think everybody in their workplace deals with that, right? Like when we have, I can't tell you how many times at the Bridge House when we have kids that come in and they identify as, LGBTQ plus community,
Yep.
They immediately, the church wants to know, well, are you telling them that you believe or don't believe in that? And I can't tell you how frustrating that question is to me, because the first thing I think to myself is, what about just the fact that they came in and they're a person,
right? And
God made them,
right?
And they have no family.
Yeah.
Like let's just look at the priority right out of the gate. There's no way I can reach them if I don't even have the care, first off, to provide clothing and food for them.
Right.
I think I need to allow them to come in and grieve and mourn and just feel loss because they're 14 and nobody wants them. And who knows what has happened to them. And when you look at their background, you see all these various different abuse cases and court dates and foster home after foster home after foster home. And you can't blame them for all the things that they're going through. And so there's wisdom and discernment as Christians that we lack when it comes to these spaces that are somewhat muddy, because I think a lot of times we don't, I almost want to call it selfish evangelism. If that's a word.
Yeah.
It's selfish. We want to change people at our timeline when we want it, so that it makes us feel better, that we're doing our job.
We want to fashion everybody after our own image.
Absolutely. And the reality is that doesn't work that way, because the Holy Spirit is what changes people. Right. But I'm just curious, when it comes to your space, how you've kind of leveraged that a little bit, where obviously you are going to have people of all different faiths.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to say, well, we're not going to have a chaplaincy for Muslims because we believe in Jesus. And so you either get on the Jesus bus or you're not in any chaplaincy program.
Yeah. I think there's maybe a couple ways to respond. First of all, and I think God's thumbprint on all of us is indelible. It doesn't matter what stain you have.
Yeah.
But we have to get to a place where we see God's thumbprint on everybody, and realize that they are God's creation, no matter where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that is so beautiful about here at the Bridge House. And, our relationship, to be honest, scales fell off my eyes. I had no idea some of the issues in our youth, in our communities, how you're filling that gap, and how you do so because you at the Bridge House see God's fingerprints in every person, that they are God's creation and therefore worthy of our care.
Yes.
Regardless.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of the Bridge House.
I appreciate that, man.
And I fall short of that all the time.
Sure.
It's tough when I'm out on I-40 and somebody cuts me off to see God's thumbprint on that.
Oh my gosh, is that the truth?
But it is. And in that split second, you go, but you have to.
Yeah.
And the second part, I think, is the question is, how can you be a Christian and have support programs of any faith?
Right.
Well, the first thing is you have to be overt about who you are. Be unabashed. And anybody who knows me, and to be honest, in the Army, I got in a little trouble, not for evangelizing, but being more overt about my faith, that people thought I was undue command influence on people and trying to bring them into Christianity.
Okay.
But I think if you are overt about your faith, this goes back to don't be two different people. You can't go at home and be teaching your kids about God, about Jesus, being a leader in your family, a religious leader in your family, and not be one at work.
Right.
Because then you're going to have two different domains, and God exists in one but doesn't in the other. It can't work.
Yeah, 100%. And the flip-flop of being in full-time vocational ministry, which I've been in, where you're in church and you're pastoring and you're passionate for Jesus and you're doing this, and then at home, that passion doesn't exist at the level that it does when you're in your congregation and you're speaking in front of everyone.
Exactly.
And it seems like people would just, I think people automatically assume, this is the same. But it's like, man, tell you, the temptation, you're so right. Like who we are when no one's watching is who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's who we really are. And I was using this illustration with my son yesterday, and he was, one of our values at home is work hard and do your best. And so he is a hard worker, but he doesn't always do his best. And I said to him, Ben, have you ever played that game Jenga? And he said, yeah, I love that game. And I said, yeah, we play that, don't we? He said, yeah, we play that game. I said, well, if you pull off one piece, what happens? He said, well, you just put it on the top. I said, okay. I said, what happens if you pull like two out? One, two. It's probably still standing. I said, what about after 4 or 5? He's like, well, it's probably starting to get really wobbly. I was like, okay, what about 10? He's like, well, the tower fell. I was like, when we sacrifice our value each time, eventually the tower falls. Mm. And you could see in his face, he goes, but then I followed up with him. I said, hey,
Life is about Jenga.
Yeah, I said, this is something I have to follow my own leadership on. Okay. But I always tell Ben that. I said, this is why I need Jesus too. I'm not perfect in this either, but I don't always do my best either, And I said, but we want to call each other out on it and hold each other accountable. Kind of what you were talking about. Was it the buddy? What did you call it?
Battle buddy.
Battle buddy. Yeah, I love that. Battle buddy. Who's your battle buddy? But it's so true. Like, because who you are in the privacy of your own home, and when no one's watching, is who you really are. And you need that accountability and to be able to be a good leader.
Yeah, and we can be vulnerable with our kids. By the way, not everybody can.
Right.
Okay. But when we can be vulnerable with our kids, why can't we have that same thing in the workplace?
Yeah.
And use our own example and both our strengths and our weaknesses.
Yeah.
To make people that we lead better.
Yes.
Just like we do with our kids.
That's right.
So.
That's special, man. Dude, I could talk to you forever, brother. That's always so fun.
We do.
I know, we do. Many people don't know this. I mentioned at the beginning, but I've have the privilege of having Bryan in our board meetings multiple times, and Bryan does a great job of not only helping us with some of these big transitions that we've been making as an organization, but he kind of is the little bird in the room to make sure that John is always aware of his blind spots. And so a lot of after our board meetings, you and I will have coffee and I'll say to Bryan, what? And as a leader, a lot of times, when you meet with an individual, obviously you want to grow and you want to learn. You say that you do. And then I remember one time I said, so what are your thoughts, Bryan? What do you think? And I'm thinking, I don't know what he's going to say. And he says, well, you need to shut up.
I did.
And I just remember laughing so hard. And so since then, he said, John, you got a ton of vision. But you need to leave room for your team to be able to share in that vision as well too. Otherwise they're not going to own it.
Right.
And that was really great wisdom. And to this day, just in our last board meeting, I write down at the top of my notebook, shut up. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Well, I know you're a special person.
Oh, thanks, man.
And this is a special place.
Yeah.
I have really enjoyed not only our personal relationship, but seeing the work you're doing here at the Bridge House, taking care of kids. And I'm excited for this expansion that you're going to embark upon.
Yeah, me too, man.
I think, it's one thing to take care of kids that are in transition. Mm-hmm. But the transition that's going to matter perhaps the most is when they age out.
For sure.
And so, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I just think that the work that you're doing here at the Bridge House is just amazing. It's nothing but a God wink. The opportunities you've got.
Man, I appreciate it, bro. Dude, you played a pivotal role in it. Yep. So I'm excited to have you, man, on our team. Excited to have you in this conversation. And I think the big takeaways that everybody can get from this is personal connection, make it happen, put some space in, get a battle buddy.
Get a battle buddy.
You got one more for us?
Yeah. Learn to trust.
Learn to trust. There it is. Dude, I love it.
Oh, by the way, trust. Quit saying that others that you have to earn my trust.
Mm.
Take the flip. Give trust at the outset, and then tell them they can lose. Because if you can learn to trust first, and that's your default, it begins to change your world.
Wow. That's awesome. We're going to leave it with that.
All right, brother.
Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. Bryan Watson, and man, great conversation, bro. Love you.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Love you too.
Yeah.